The Leadership Excellence series includes 2 book clubs. These books are resources that teach leadership competencies, skills, and best practices. While reading a book may not automatically transform you into a skilled leader, it will provide insight and actionable advice to maximize your potential. And the book club format allows for great discussions and participation. So with that, Scott, could you present a summary of the book and mention a couple of the wonderful comments that we had from the readers today?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Leadership often, requires taking risks, blazing new trails, daring to try new things that people never thought about. The leadership lesson from Star Trek: The Next Generation, Make It So, is the first book. Some may be asking, why do we choose this book? If you're not familiar with the series, that's okay. The summaries, were pretty concise, but I initially read this book back in 1997. And reading through some of the summaries, knowing the series and having been a fan, and the correlations that the author put together really helped me re-envision the way that I looked at leadership and how I addressed my own leadership. And so when we brought up the book study, this came, completely to my mind, as, it had been such an impactful thing to me that the overall themes of leadership in it gave me, I thought it would be good for a lot of people to go through and maybe find the same benefit out of it. Just, some of the comments that came up, like from Mercedes, Jean-Luc Picard's leadership style is refreshing. It could almost be perceived as simple, but once you take a moment to analyze it, the light bulb goes on. Rob, I'm gonna blow this. Rob Buchnowitz, particularly like the superintendent's message at the beginning of each chapter. There's one that, the leadership really caused people to stop and think. And I'm not going to reread everything that is up on the community at this point, but hopefully, the idea was also to make it fun. So often I've read leadership books that are just so dry and reiterations of things. So, with that, I'm going to open the floor to everybody, and whoever has a comment as to what they have gotten out of it, please just start jumping in. Otherwise, I'll pick on people. Grant, go ahead. How about Mark?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, I have a potentially unique background as well, that for my life in hotel finance, I was in the military. And so I think the other thing I kind of picked up from reading this book was, in the military, you're taught, not everything is your fault or anything you even necessarily had to do with, but if it happened in this case on your ship, it's still your responsibility. And so I kind of saw that throughout the book of, not everything was necessarily his fault that was caused, like when he got beamed above the ship and then taken over without him having anything to do with it, but it was immediately his responsibility to try to fix it. Obviously he tried to make contact with his ship and they ended up figuring it out. But I think that's something I've taken into the finance world and my teams and my hotels, that, okay, something may have went wrong. Somebody expensed something they shouldn't have, or signed a contract they shouldn't have. And it may not have been my fault, but now it's my responsibility to jump in and get the situation resolved. So that's kind of one of the takeaways I saw throughout this book as well.
Hi,
Good
this
point.
is Susan. I like the idea of the mantra, make it so, is short and to the point and just full big picture. Let's get it done and get it done together.
Great comment. Great comment. Who we hear from next?
Grant, do you want to try again with your audio? I don't know if he has audio.
Can you hear me now?
There you
Okay. Yeah. So I love TNG, the new generation for the uninitiated, I guess. And I actually had a hard time reading this book because I've watched every episode of the new generation. And while I was reading this book, it was like I was watching the show. So to get to the leadership, because the leadership points weren't expressly put out there, right? They were there for you to listen to what he's saying and what the superintendent's saying, and to draw from what they're saying, what leadership aspects may be apparent in that one episode. And it was hard for me to get out of the episode in my mind as I'm reading it and reliving it and trying to absorb the meaningful actual leadership lesson that was trying to be iterated to me through the book. But I read through the book. It was really good. It was just like, again, it was just like reading a memoir of Jean-Luc Picard, which was awesome. It was great and a great experience. But I've always thought that the TNG, and especially Jean-Luc Picard, was the epitomal leader of, and his behaviors really harken back to a very strong, ethical leadership style that really speaks to responsibility and the gravity that each one of us as leaders have in our roles. So it was super enjoyable to read. It was just hard for me to get some of the specific learning lessons that I think may have been trying to be iterated to me out there, because I was reading it almost as a story and not as a leadership development book. So, but no, I loved it, and it's just Jean-Luc Picard's been a part of my leadership development probably for the last 30 years anyway. So, yeah, thank you for picking this book.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm coming back. I'm actually coming back through mine here because I saw Barb make a posting that, there really was about, 25 pages that you really had to go through to really get what's there. And it all came under, after each chapter, the personal journals, which were just the writer's recap of what was being identified in that specific chapter. And so, in my rereading of it, because again, I've seen all of these episodes myself, I went to those to see what the recap of the lesson was that they were trying to teach. And, and it's interesting. I mean, I truly appreciate when when that we can identify with, something that is fictional, but is really, driven by this, and it holds up to today. Art, I see you're out there, and I loved your comment here. You want to, chime in a little bit?
And Scott, too, we do have two people with their hands up.
Oh, okay.
Tessa.
Tessa, go ahead.
Yeah, Art put in the chat that he's driving, so he's not
Yeah,
gonna
I
be
saw
able to
that.
chime in.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, actually, I was distracted by the fictional piece. I don't really care for the science fiction either, and so it was like it was a little bit distracting to me. I wanted the meat and potatoes, so I was really excited about the little personal journals at the end to just get to the point here. And these I felt like you could have on poster boards in the office, or these are just little snippets of like truths that are really good. And I took a lot of them. I put little tabbies on a bunch of the ones I liked, but
All right.
yeah, there was plenty. And I, between just the topic and then the recap of it, I was excited about a lot of the truths that were there. But yeah, lost me on the science fiction.
That's all right.
That's
That's
okay.
all right.
I missed the whole Star Trek era.
Milner.
Hello.
Hey.
Well, for me, it was actually very different because I actually started my career as in management when Star Trek came out, started in the next generation. So I was watching the show and I was a fan of the show. And I drew a lot of parallels watching the show. And I saw the leadership when I was watching the show. And I even thought of the general manager of the hotel being the captain of the ship, and the director of finance or controller back then was the number one. And, I was comparing, drawing the parallels of what was happening in an episode versus what happens when you're driving a hotel where, all sorts of things happen in operations, and everyone has to put their work to come up with a solution to end up, I guess, at the end, in our case, with a profit. So
Yeah.
it was really interesting to see. It was a pleasure to read the book for me because I was a fan of the show, and I'm like, oh, this is now full circle, because I started watching it and drawing parallels, and now I'm learning from the book that there was a leadership component to all of this. So I found it to be really, really great book. Thanks.
Great. Great. Let's see who else had a hand up there. Roy.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
I apologize about my voice, but it's 4 a.m. here in Sydney, so it's a bit of an early start.
Welcome to joining us. That's commitment. It's truly appreciated.
No problem. Yeah, look, I'm someone who I've never watched Star Trek growing up, so getting into the book was a little bit challenging for me. And so once I sort of got part way through, and there was the message about the cliff notes, I kind of did spring straight to that. But I think as I've sort of gotten to it, one of the things that stood out to me the most was around communication. And it was because I've been involved throughout my whole career with certain leaders which are very good communicators and certain leaders which are very poor communicators. And so it's just really stood out to me as something that really differentiates between a good leader and a bad leader, because to really achieve outcomes, you need to be able to get teams on board, get the messages across appropriately, and whether that's yourself doing it or other people doing it, it makes all the difference.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the key leadership principles that everyone talks about is just plain communication. And in our shorthanded, text-driven communication methods these days, sometimes that gets lost. Sometimes I have people say, well, I don't want to know where the backstory is. Just give it to me, and it's like, no, if you don't understand where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going. So You know, but the other thing was, you know, responsibility. I mean, very early on in my career, I had someone say to me, Captain Robert Smith was asleep in his cabin on the night the Titanic hit the iceberg, but he was still responsible for it. And I kept that in mind as a leadership, you know, you're responsible for things, whether it's your fault, whether you're there to direct it and your fault or not. Leadership is a responsible position. So my friend Troy Pullen.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting, and it's funny, I picked it up watching this show and kind of loved it as a leadership style. And it differs slightly from Captain Kirk, is that I gathered from Captain Picard that he would bring everybody together if they had a particular challenge or something. And even if somebody else would speak to what that challenge might be, but he would give everybody an opportunity to input on what they thought a solution might be. And so a lot of times it wasn't even him necessarily saying, oh, well, this is what we're going to do. He would get other people's input about what they were experienced in, like in engineering. And you know, Jordy would say, well, we could do this. And then he would go, you know, it made sense to him. He wouldn't try to correct it. Okay, make it so. So he brought together as a team and operated as a team from a leadership style and involved everyone in decision making. And there were occasionally times where he would override everyone if he felt his course of action was the better. But mostly he would involve everyone in input in a particular thing that was going on. And I like to try and use that as my leadership style as well.
Great. Let's see. Who's next?
So Scott, when I was reading through all the comments, that there was also a trust component, yes, communication, how to communicate, you don't always know how to communicate with a person and with, 50 emails a day. But the other thing was trust, that the leader must trust their team, and their team also must trust their leader. So I think that one resonated.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a leader is only as good as the people who are following him, and otherwise you're not leading anything. I mean, but you got to let people sometimes even make their own mistakes, because that's the only way they can grow.
Yeah, that was also mentioned. I remember reading that too.
I don't like to be a helicopter parent type of manager,
Barb, look at all these hands you got to raise.
Yeah,
by bringing
you did.
I did a controversial.
Art's connected to us. Art's connected.
Trust is a big one though. So
yes, it is.
So I don't know who came up next. Maybe Felicia.
Yeah.
Oh, you're muted right now.
Okay, all better. I too found it interesting at first that here we're reading a book about really the future. Everything in it was, science fiction and the future. But it could as well as have been a biblical book, or it could have been a book in, I don't care, 1500s, 1700s, 19, wherever it is. These concepts are evergreen. And they come up in different ways, but at the base, you've got like a baseline of leadership. And we've brought up the points. I mean, I went back like Roy did. The communication struck me a lot, because you could have all those other great qualities, But if you can't communicate or know how to communicate, you're dead in the water and you're not an effective leader. Trust was mentioned. If you don't earn the trust, again, you're on an island all by yourself. But throughout it all, the captain was leading by example. I mean, I used to see it in hospitality. There were the managers who used to like to point, do this, do that, and you know, misuse of delegation, where others, they'd help out a little bit. And together, I think they created a more effective team by having that type of a style, not just being a pointer. You have to be a leader, a doer.
Exactly. Exactly. Thanks, Felicia.
Thank
Maria,
you, Scott.
Marie, I'm sorry.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, I kind of joined the ranks of I didn't really get into Star Trek. So following it through, I was kind of like, oh, these are fun stories, but I don't even know what a Kardashian is. Well, I know what a Kardashian is, but different kind of Kardashian. Anyway, long story. So my son and I had a
Same
fun
principle.
time, Googling a Kardashian. Am I saying what is a Kardashian? Yeah. But the leadership isn't always perfect, and that was kind of something that I saw a lot in the themes. They stumbled a little bit, or maybe they couldn't be perfect because they were abducted and their brain was being probed and all these crazy things. But in the end, they did the right thing, and I like that they ended with the story about Q, who is judging him and judging them, and I liked how he was saying, go ahead and judge, and continue to judge, because we're just going to do the right thing. So you can keep watching me all you want, we're just going to continue to do the right thing. I kind of like that, because that's I'm in IT, that's where I sit, and so if we're doing our job right, nobody notices. And so that's how I've always kind of talked to my teams about is, you know what, we can sit back and toast each other because we did a good job. Nobody noticed because it just worked and we did the right thing. So that was kind of what I got away from it.
That's a great observation. It's a great observation. Art, I see you got your hand up and you must have pulled over.
No, I don't have time to pull over, unfortunately. So I'm going to make mine quick. But thank you for the comments. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. It was a real interesting book. For me, my wife and I have probably watched every one of the Star Trek series and shows at least 4 or 5 times over. So I'm real familiar, with it. Seeing it written was fascinating. And as the one comment that I had posted, where they discuss the element of when you do something, whether it's right or wrong, take a moment back and look at it, and then evaluate it, learn from it, taking your time. And I think that as I thought about all of the other episodes that I've watched and in reading through the book, it really offers a tremendous amount of fascinating different ways of looking at things. So I enjoyed it. It was fun. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Mercedes?
You're on mute if you are talking, Mercedes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go.
Okay. So I really enjoyed this book. To me, it was like very simple, but very to the point. Especially when he said to encourage and reward those in your teams that are always taking the initiative. He said, in rare occasions, you will regret giving people the opportunity to do more. So always the answer should be permission granted. Also, the part of communication, the book as science fiction, but it could almost be today. Today we are surrounded by all these techie devices so we can communicate instantly, but somehow, you know, maybe a 1 minute face-to-face conversation will be the answer. And also the part what he says that you know, the morale and the motivation of the team is a reflection of the leadership. That's something, you know, that struck with me, because sometimes we are so focused in finding out what's going on, what's not working out, but we don't see ourselves as part of the issue. And also to me, very important is not only to be understood, but also to understand what's going on with your organization. And, you know, I guess at this level, we all have like similar abilities. So what is going to distinguish us is, you know, that extra, the application, that extra touch that we do. So I thought it was a great book.
Great, thanks, Mercedes. Brett Connor.
Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Okay. I am on one of those people that know absolutely nothing about Star Trek, at least until I read this book. And I had a hard time getting into it because of lots of different names and terminology that I was trying to make sense of. But as I kept reading it, I liked it more and more. I know a lot of people have talked about trust. I actually have a different spin on that. What I got out of the book is how empowered Picard's team was. And Picard found himself in several different situations where he was depending on his team and he wasn't even physically able to lead his team, and how he had an empowered team that could help solve issues and help him. And I found that very fascinating, how empowered his team was. And there's clearly a lot of trust that he has within his team, and it was a really good book overall.
Great, good comments. Good comments. Rob, I see you got your hand up.
Yes, hi everyone. I echo sort of Brett's comments about I am a very, very limited Star Trek fan or viewer. So I think the organization of the book for me was a little bit choppy, and quite frankly, I was very thankful that the superintendent's message at each chapter or each situation was able to sort of frame it for you, so that going in you at least had an idea where they were going. I thought the leadership and all the challenges they were faced with were really, really good. I thought I liked that part of the book, but I think it would have been better served for people who aren't or have no idea about the book or the series, excuse me. I think it would have been better served to have some sort of prologue that may have set the stage for everybody and kind of like explain some terms that you're sitting there saying, oh my God, I don't know what that is. So you're instead of focusing on what you need to focus on in the book, you're trying to figure out things that maybe you don't really need to know because the message is still there. But I found myself wondering, what is that? And then, then you have another exercise of going to somewhere and looking it up, which I did not personally do, but I understand that others may have. But I did overall like it. I think the empowerment it was the big thing that came through to me. I think that Picard was very much in tune with his team, and the team, they trusted each other both ways, and I really liked that part of it.
Yeah, I think, and that's a good point, Rob, is those that aren't familiar with the series and what have you, probably should have, when I was putting it up there and as we were putting out the instructions, we probably should have said, start at the back where they have the summaries and the characters and the definitions and that type of stuff, and then go back to the front. Because you would have spent, you wouldn't have spent all that time trying to figure out what this was. You know, if I recommend this again to somebody, I'm going to tell them to start after the epilogue, to get the history behind it. That's a good point. But all good comments here. All good comments. Who else wants to chime in here before I start picking on people? Let's see. Brittany.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm running the thing. No, I actually am curious. So, and everyone has to be honest about this, but who chose to just read the 25 Truths and who chose to actually read the full book? I'm very curious. Maybe raise your hand if you did the 25-page review. Okay. One honest person, two, a few more. I'm just curious how many people. Just 3? 4? Don't be shy.
Well, I was halfway through the book and then you sent that
Okay.
message. I'm like, oh, great.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a shortcut. And as it turned out, my schedule was so consumed today that I felt really prepared by having done what I've done.
No, that's awesome. I was just curious to see, but it looks like a lot of people read the full book too, which is great. I was just, okay, read
Yeah.
half and then switched.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like others, I'm not into the Star Trek and I had to do a little bit more deep diving into the idea, but overall the concepts were there. As mentioned before, it could be the future or the past. It's all relative.
Yeah,
It's
for
all about getting things done with other folks.
Mhm. And yeah, Susan said she remembered watching the episodes while reading. So yeah, that's great. It looks like a lot
Yeah.
of people did read it. Awesome. Anyone else have anything to say?
I tried earlier. Can you hear me now?
Yes. we
Gotcha,
can.
Tiffany.
Oh, I had my laptop connected to my desktop, and apparently my mic doesn't work when I'm doing that. So sorry. So I've agreed with a lot of all of the points that I've made. I think that, I mean, leaders it's important to have many of these attributes, if you know, but so I definitely think that, the communication and trust is a must for a successful leader. But one of the chapters, I think it was like competence or something like that. So I'm reading 2 books and I may commingle them. So hopefully I don't. I've got one I'm doing for our department head group and then this one. So, but there was a connection between the two that I guess I wanted to share. So in the Star Trek book, I know it mentioned, being as, is like something about being as, oh shoot, let me think. I can find it. It's like leaders have never been more effective than the people around them. And then the other book that I'm reading talks about finding, the right people and putting them in the right spots on the bus. And then, I don't know, I think the connection there was just, and then I also heard something about, leaders, nope, hang on. There is always someone in the room that's smarter at you than something. So I just think that all of that kind of went together for me. It's just like building your team with the right people. And then if you don't have them on, there was another part in the book where basically it's like making a decision and sticking with it. Like don't waste their time, don't waste your time, make a decision and move forward and either move that person to the right seat or do you both a favor and, let them move on with their life and you move on with yours kind of thing. So I just liked that in the book, it talked about, making sure it was something to the effect about, it said something about being poorly trained or ineffectively led. So, if your team doesn't have proper training, I've been in a job where, they just kind of throw you in there and it's just like, you figure it out, well, I don't feel good about myself and I'm sure that I'm not being productive for my supervisors. So, just the importance of making sure that you have the proper tools, for your team to make, so that you're, like it said, you're only as successful as the team that you're leading. So I guess, I don't know if all of that made sense. I kind of went all over the place there trying to remember where I got it all from, but I don't know if anybody else had found that interesting, but I just did.
Well, great. Those are great observations, especially when you're trying to juggle two of them at the same time, to see that they actually dovetail to each other, and that a lot of the stuff that is out there on leadership, they're all saying the same thing. It's something that sometimes we intuitively know, but have a hard time putting into practice. And that's the one thing I found with even my own leadership is, it's a matter of constantly practicing the principles and incorporating them into a way of life. The whole world can't be like my home life, which is filled with cats. I mean, so but yeah, let's see. Do we have any other hands here?
Hey,
Go ahead,
Scott,
Barb.
when I was flipping through the book, because I was one of those that did not read all of it, but I read a couple chapters. They were always put in these situations, but of course their situations are life and death usually, and the situations that I know I'm put in are usually not of that importance, needing to react very quickly, but and I guess I kind of, maybe I'm too analytical at times, but sometimes they're saying do something, you must do something. Other times it was telling me that you need to sometimes understand the situation before you can enact. So, like I said, sometimes I think I was like, yes, but you said this, but now all of a sudden you're recommending that I do that. So as a leader, and I guess I'm kind of curious as a group, do you want immediate decisions, actions, empowerment, or do you allow your teams time to process the information, to make recommendations, action and stuff? I mean, and maybe it is a situational, decision that has to be made. Like if it is immediate, like let's say everybody's internet is down and we must get it back up on the property. I mean, that's not really something that you can step back on, but that was one thing that I'm talking about a lot right now.
Well, I think we bring, especially within this industry, it's, we have times where we have to react. There are other times when we have times for consideration, and you got to, and collaboration and what have you. When the fire alarm is going off, is no time for a staff meeting, kind of thing. But after the fire emergency is over, yeah, that's time to get together to say, okay, what did we do right? What did we, what can we do better? I don't think they're one mutually exclusive or collectively exhaustive. I think that, we every day run into those things that, we have to decide or we have to collaborate. And teaching those skills, they're is really that's at least at my stage of the career right now, is teaching that skill is where I'm trying to go to. Grant, you got I see your hand up again.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of what you're saying as well. I mean, there's, when we talk about the styles of leadership, the thing with Picard is that he displays multiple styles at multiple times. So in a command and control situation, such as in the heat of a battle, then it becomes very directive. But in the matter of there's a group decision that needs to be made, then he changes his style and he becomes collaborative. So I think that the answer to your question, which is, I see this a lot, in the time that I've been developing as a leader, where people are like, well, you just told me this, and where's the manual that says this, this, and this, where it's very cut and dry. And unfortunately, leadership, in my opinion at least, is not cut and dry. There's no one style that wins every situation. And true leadership, as displayed, comes down to being able to flex your leadership style and be most appropriate in the moment. And I think that's what the Picard book is kind of saying, right? Because there are times when he is command and control. There are times when he has zero control. And like we talked about in that one chapter where he becomes Borg, and his crew has to make every decision. And he's developed his crew to that point, because that's like a later season where he becomes the Borg and his team is already well developed. It's not the first couple of seasons where his team are still learning each other and developing their own leadership style and skills. And it's very in the show itself. It's like you can see even his number one guy is developing. He's very one way at the very beginning of this show, and as time goes on, his character and his development is becoming very apparent to the point where he should and he does eventually assume his own control of a captainship. But at the end of the day, if they remain in their archetypal, one-sided, single-faceted leadership styles that they all have at the very beginning of the show, then the show stops being very interesting. It's the development thereof and their ability to change in the moment, or not in the moment, but over time, to be able to lead in different directions in different manners that befits the situations, even if it's outside of their normal comfort zone. That makes this series and what makes this book meaningful, because you see these different ideas that are being thrown out there, and every one of them, like anyone can read it and say that one principle is true, but it may conflict with the previous principle. But that's just the way real leadership is. At sometimes you have to do one thing, at other times you have to consider a different approach to be most effective, right? And that's why we have the different teams like HR and IT and all these other people who have these expertise that protect us from ourselves, right? Because if there's just one Captain Kirk and he's like going sideways like in the Western, then the reality is Captain Kirk would have been demoted and he would have been probably court-martialed for all the things he did on his show. But that's why we have our Crushers and our Rikers and our Troys around us to help us also not go off the rails and keep ourselves centered and focused, and understanding that our relationships and our responsibilities are inherent as part of our leadership positions, and we have that heavy onus and that gravitas to lead. And leadership is a privilege. It's not a right. And so he has to involve everybody, as was said earlier, to make the best decision possible. And when he's not there, because he's done all of that and shown them how to do that, they can make decisions on their own that lead to the best results. That's a lot of what I got out of that, and what I get out of the show, and what I take back to reality in the 20th century.
I think that was informative, but I do want to say that was probably a really great comment to kind of start wrapping up this. We are coming down to the last few minutes. So does anyone else, Scott too, last minute comments, anything like that, before I just go into a little bit of, Jason?
I actually had a question for Scott. When you mentioned mutual exclusion and collective exhaustion earlier, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that. Like, can you give examples of what you mean?
That there is never just one decision that is one way or the other. There's an interconnectedness. Following another sci-fi trope from a guy by the name of Douglas Adams, he talked about the interconnectedness of all things. And it's true, okay? Nothing is, there's never just a single decision. There's always consequences to it. And there is never just one answer to any question. So, you can't have just one or the other, which would be mutually exclusive. But, collectively, that the collective exhaustion is basically that everything comes together and still you have nothing.
Okay.
The thing that I get out of the book, and again, especially as you get to the end of each chapter where the observation on the topic comes in, is they're written to be a training manual. And again, at the stage of my career, I'm constantly looking behind me to see who is coming up. What can I do short of a Vulcan mind meld to take everything that I have up here and pass that on to the next crew? And especially these days we're hiring and finding people who really want to be in, most especially the accounting side of this business is such a challenge. Is what can I do to impart to them what they can take to their next level? And what can I do to open that door? And I had a boss once upon a time said there were two types of bosses. There's the ones that are going to tell you, well, I'm going to teach you almost everything I know, because if I taught you everything, they wouldn't need me. Or there's the boss that's going to say, I'm going to teach you everything I know, because then you can replace me and I can do something else and move on. And I always tried to be that second one, and don't want to be the hoarder of knowledge. And that's also what they talk about through here is, training your people to make right decisions. But understanding we're human, we're gonna make mistakes. It's okay. One of my bosses here at the company said, we got to train them so that when they make a mistake, we identify it and they go on to make better mistakes. So
I like it. Let's see. Troy, you want to give us some final comments?
Well, some final comments. So one of the interesting things about looking at Star Trek, sorry, I didn't turn my video back on, is you've got a group of, Captain Picard has a group of people around him, even in leadership positions, that have different styles. You've got Worf, who is the warrior and the warrior mentality, and sometimes he's let's kill them all type of environment. But at the same time, he instills in them the leadership attributes. So it's also looking at people, though, even though you may agree with their premise on a particular subject, that they have that character within them that, even though you may differ, you're all still trying to achieve the same goal. And to appreciate somebody else's point of view and to incorporate it into your thought process, it also helps let you interact with them better by, coming at things from their point of view as well. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. I always found that interesting that even though you have people and it comes to diversity, a lot of differing, it doesn't matter that you might necessarily agree with their point. You listen to their point, you come together with a conclusion of whatever you're trying to reach there.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to start wrapping up unless anyone raises their hand and has anything left to say. I'll start talking and I'll look for hands, but thank y'all for actually reading the book and coming to talk today. I'm sure Scott didn't want to have to call on people, so thank you for making his day easier. Just a few things. Please continue to have those conversations in the community. We'll try and post some more questions as we move forward into our next sessions. We are having our next month in June is the in-person session. It's going to be during High Tech Toronto. So if you are going to High Tech, make sure to come to the session. The speaker does not want us to record the session, but he has agreed to us posting a couple of his articles for the group to read and discuss. And then past that, we'll start sending more information out about the July session. So if you're not going to High Tech, you're going to have a little bit of a gap between now and the July session. And one other thing is we do have a webinar on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central Time, and it's going to be U.S. legislative updates from the CEO of AHOA. So if you are interested in joining that, it is on the website and available for registration. So with that, thank y'all. Oh, Rob.
Quick question, the speaker that you mentioned, the links for the articles that you're going to be able to read, are we going to get those free High Tech?
Yes.
Okay,
yep.
Great.
Yep. We're working with him now on his his presentation live. And so we'll get those articles and documents as well for those who are not attending High Tech Toronto. So you can at least have an idea of what's going on.
The location at High Tech, is that going to be on an email, or is it going to be, how are we going to know where it is?
The location of this specific event at High Tech, or just High Tech?
Yes, yes.
Yes, it's on the schedule already. It is a Thursday morning session, but I can definitely send out an email about it so everyone knows time, date, and room number at High Tech. And we'll post it in the community too, because we'd love to see y'all there. It's obviously meant for y'all, but we are going to open it up to others as well. So hopefully we get to meet some of y'all in person next month.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Anything else? Questions? Not even related to this or anything?
Looking forward to seeing you all at High Tech. I will be there to chair and kick off that in-person session.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for today. And then we'll be in touch via email for our next sessions. Everyone have a good day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. So,
Brittany, is the schedule going forward? Is that printed somewhere? I know when we first started, it was all the way to June. I didn't see the dates and times for the rest.
Yes, on the link, we have not chosen the July or August dates yet. We only have a September, but we are working on those, so they will be up in June to give everyone a better idea. And when they are up, I'll make sure to let everyone know. So as of right now, we just have our High Tech session Thursday on the 29th at 9 a.m. But we'll add to that schedule, and then I'll send out an announcement about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anyone else? Questions?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.